Tonight on the Goblin's Corner.
We're interviewing Ian Tassin, the creator of the Apotheosis RPG.
That's how we roll. 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 That's how we roll.
Welcome to the Goblin's Corner. My name is Eric.
And I'm Matt.
And tonight,
We're interviewing Ian Tassin of the Apotheosis RPG.
that's right. Apotheosis RPG is a dynamic tabletop fantasy role-playing game, which allows for a host of customization options. With multiple character builds, 11 species, 40 weapon options, 80 original spells, and way much more, it's put together so that every character feels unique and plays unique. Apotheosis also has a character progression and combat system designed for more immersive gaming experience. Ian Tassin is the creator of Apotheosis, and he joins us this evening. Ian, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about Apotheosis.
Yeah, it's basically, so I've been playing tabletop role-playing games basically my whole life. My dad got into it in first edition D&D, and so I've been playing, he kind of brought me up on them. So, yes, and I always kind of had a few ways that I felt that the industry of tabletop role-playing games was sort of moving in ways where I felt like it was not playing to all of its strengths in regards to, I always felt that in a lot of the mechanics were kind of almost designed to emulate like video games where you have a lot more constricted things on what you can do. And I kind of wanted to emphasize the greater freedom that, doing it all in your mind can kind of give you while still maintaining a hard enough rule set that it's, a game and not just improv or something,
Sure. So give me a little bit about like the storyline and stuff with Apotheosis.
Yeah, so it's like of making it or of the sort of
Like a little taste of the world.
Yeah. So it's designed to be mostly setting agnostic, so you can kind of put it over anything that you want. I wanted it to be really flexible in that way. There's a little bit of kind of soft world building that I do in the book to kind of give you a starting place. It's similar in that sense to something like D&D or Pathfinder, where you can kind of, you've got like your Forgotten Realms or whatever, but you can kind of use it for a lot of different things. And so, and the basics of the world as it is you've essentially got your 11 species, and a lot of those are, you've got elves and dwarves and your normal stuff. And then we've got some sort of more unique things. A fan favorite is the Neurocyte, which is basically one of the playable species that's a little parasite that can burrow into the brain of a creature and then control their body.
Oh, that's always flavorful.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that people enjoy that one. There's also the Bijou, which is like a halfling with no hair and transparent skin that's got some innate magical abilities. Those are another one of our sort of more unique ones, and they're
Like
sort
a glass frog?
rare within the world, at least as its default explanation is they're
It's not a glass frog, Matt. It's a glass halfling.
yeah.
There's a glass half full joke in there that I'm
was
desperately trying to let go of.
I was gonna make a pun about how they can't lie because you can see right through them.
Fair.
Yeah. No poker face at all.
Nah. So to me, this seems very, I don't know if you've ever played like GURPS or Rifts or anything like that, but it almost feels to me like the D&D Pathfinder version of a GURPS or Rifts, in that you've got kind of a Swiss Army knife of playing whatever you want.
Yeah. And the central philosophy I had in making it was that I wanted it to be something where you can really get kind of to anywhere that you want, and with the system. So it's I wanted to make it, above all else, something that's very flexible. So it's the kind of thing that you can learn and then use for whatever you want, like a variety of different. types. And actually, right now, what I'm working on is the sci-fi like conversion / expansion for it that I'm going to make cross-compatible with the original. The original is all in a fantasy setting, so. But I want to bring it to the point where you can kind of use it in any number of things. So
cool,
fantastic. So you have 3 major differences between Apotheosis and other TTRPGs. Tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I'd say is probably the EP system, which is kind of designed around making combat more action, mentally like action oriented. So it kind of wants to let you simulate something more like a fantasy like novel, where generally you've got characters that are doing sort of dynamic actions and using their movement and evading attacks more than just absorbing them with their constitution. So it's replacing something that most systems are going to use something similar to hit points, or they're using something that's going to make you extremely brittle. And it's kind of trying to find a middle ground between those, where you've got this EP, which basically lets you move and evade in combat, and use it to you can use it for anything from like, oh well, I'm going to deflect this blow, to I'm going to jump back, or I'm going to use my armor to catch this sword or something, right?
And correct me on the premise of this. Is it's basically I maneuver away from combat so I don't take damage, because I've used my EP to kind of evade that or block, as you mentioned. And so it kind of goes on the thing, if you move, you don't get hit.
Right.
If you stand still, you're going to get hit and take damage.
Yeah.
Unless you have like superior armor, and even that can be used. It's a very interesting mechanic, which I haven't seen anybody else use.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's I think it's, as far as I know, it's fairly unique to our system. I haven't seen anyone else use something quite like it. There's like some similar things, like I know Starfinder has like a stamina that you can use above your hit points type thing, but that, which it's somewhat reminiscent of, but it's definitely a very different in its implementation, and in it's more, the game's more based around it, as opposed to that sort of a little buffer that you have. And so the idea is, if you can't use your EP for some reason, then you're going to be wounded, and being wounded is going to act like it would work in real life. Like it acts like a real wound.
Get your arm cut off, you're stabbed.
Yeah.
Bad times.
Yeah. And so basically anytime you're wounded, you make a death save where the DC is the damage you've taken. And then that, if you only save by a little bit, then something bad happens, like you get crippled because you get your arm cut off or something. So that's kind of the idea.
What I like about this is that because you can get stabbed in the chest and survive, or just straight up die. People die from all sorts of things.
Sure. You can get stabbed in the leg and die. There's a lot of veins that run all through your body, and they're all kind of important.
So this gives a little bit more lethality to combat, which is missing from a lot of the high fantasy systems like Pathfinder and D&D, because you're still going strong against the dragon at one hit point, and like, dude, you're at death's door. You're literally being held together by duct tape and grit right now, and it's
That's the one tooth you haven't spat out yet.
Yeah, exactly. And how long did it take you to put together Apotheosis?
It's kind of a hard answer to give exactly, because before I knew I was going to like make a system, I'd been working on a lot of these things in like a homebrewing context of like stuff I would use in games that I ran and stuff like that. And then once I actually started writing it, it kind of just all fell together rather quickly. And I was able to pull all these different things and then get quickly into, I did the first edition write-up of it within, I want to say like 3 months, and then got into playtesting. because I just had, it kind of came full formed
Mm-hmm.
once I started putting a concerted effort into really just getting it all. Once I decided it was going to be a system, basically. And of course, there was a lot of revising and play testing and all that after that initial draft. But yeah, so depending on how you're counting, between a few years or like a year with the first draft being done and play testing. So depends on where you start.
Sure. Just out of curiosity, because I've seen this happen in the past, how many drastic changes did you have to make from the time you wrote it down till after it entered combat with, alpha and beta testing?
Yeah, definitely a good few. Enough to the point where I can't say it was like this certain number.
Oh, sure.
And there was also things like, if I look at like the very original draft, there were just like contradictions in the book that
Sure.
Were at sometimes like major contradictions where I was like, I would be writing up one thing and I was thinking that I had written something else to work differently, and then you end up with this thing that just doesn't work, and so you have to go through and you're like, okay, well, you can make it. There were major revisions in that regard too, so where it's like just fixing contradictions and stuff like that. One of the more major things is that went through, I think, the most revision was working on how we wanted to deal with like defense or like armor class equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
Because so the idea of the EP is like a little bit similar, where you're evading attacks, but then there's also something to be said of how good the attack was in the first place and whether or not it had a chance to hit.
Sure.
And so that comes into play, and it's also mechanically you want to be rolling to hit. You don't just want to say, well, I'm hitting, and you're just going to do math all the time. So a big part of it was keeping the gameplay of it in mind, and like what is the fun thing to do in the rest of the gameplay. And so we ended up keeping like a defense score armor class equivalent for hitting, and adjusting, and then also having kind of this hybrid system that also uses a little bit of a damage reduction for certain armor types. And that was a big change that we made relatively near the beginning of playtesting.
It's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what other games and media did you draw inspiration from to put Apotheosis together?
And you mentioned Starfinder and Pathfinder and stuff too.
Yeah, the big D&D, Pathfinder, Starfinder, those are definitely, I've been looking at a lot of those, especially because of how flexible those systems are, and I think that flexibility is the thing about them that is great. Like more than anything else, I think that the thing that like D&D 5e has done very well is that it's flexible enough to be relatively easily homebrewed a little bit into whatever setting you want.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that was something that I wanted to capture and actually play off of a little bit more than they do. So that was definitely a big inspiration in that regard. There were also, I was looking into a lot of other more niche systems. Obviously, looking at stuff like Savage Worlds, and you've got Hard by the Apocalypse.
Oh yeah.
Other similar, because and again, those are kind of capturing that flexibility that I was looking for, and how they handle that. In terms of fantasy elements, there was a pretty niche system I was looking at called Last Arc, that I pulled from a little bit and thought, particularly in some of the design of the book, actually, like the layout, more than mechanics, is I thought they did a very good job and pulled from them. In terms of other media, though, I pulled from a lot because, again, I wanted to capture the flexibility. So one thing I looked to a lot in designing like the magic system or the spells were were the Magic systems made by Brandon Sanderson's books, because I'm a fairly big Brandon Sanderson fan. And I think, having that kind of magic is something that's more fun, where you kind of get to apply more creativity around how you're using your spell to make it do different things.
For those who don't know his books, give a little taste of what he writes.
Well, okay, so I'll go with one thing that I kind of basically directly ripped from the Stormlight Archive, which was their solution for flight, because there's not like a flat fly spell in Apotheosis, because I always felt that it was strangely limiting, because it essentially solves all movement issues, and it gives the DM or GM a lot less ability to create interesting situations and problems for the players, because they can just fly over most things. So I don't have a flat fly solution. Instead, I went with something more like Brandon Sanderson did in the Stormlight Archives, and have this gravitational control where you can change the pull of gravity on yourself. And then you're going to have to, it's kind of like this checks and balances thing where, okay, yeah, you can kind of ignore a lot of terrain and you can essentially fly, but you also are going to have to contend with the speed that you're moving and mitigating falling damage, which is a rather serious contender in Apotheosis.
So consequences of action in a sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Yeah. So that was, that's kind of one of the spells that's most directly influenced by him. There was also, I pulled through stuff like Spider-Man I want something, you always want to do like something like the web slinging, and I never felt like there was a good kind of spell for that. So I made a conjure sort of rope that adheres to things when you create it. And that kind of can be pretty easily maneuvered into that kind of Spider-Man niche, where you could use it for a lot of other things. You're just normal transversal down into a pit, or make a rope bridge or whatever. And
you don't see a conjure rope spell in any game. Think about that. They've got web.
Yeah.
They've got conjure. You can conjure a steed out of nowhere in D&D and on all the other games, but you don't just conjure some rope. Can't be Charlie Bronson with this rope. You know where I'm going with this.
Well, the thing is once upon a time in D&D, there was a spell called Skyhook.
Oh, you're right. I forgot about that. What was that, second?
Yeah. And so, it was kind of like the opposite of this idea. Instead of conjuring the rope to swing on, it was basically a magical force so that your rope always had a place to attach to.
I like the web slinging idea.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's great.
One is Ian's approach is Spider-Man, and the second edition approach was Indiana Jones.
Pitfall?
Yeah, Pitfall.
Yeah. That's a deep cut, guys.
That's why I went with Indiana Jones, so that somebody might actually
recognize
under
30 is looking up, what's Pitfall? Let me go Google that. What's a Commodore? What's that? Ian, I understand you had a Kickstarter out, and it was successful.
Yes. Yeah. It was, we got like 500% funded, which is just amazing. I really did not see that coming, so.
Fantastic. So, did you guys pull out any stretch goals with that, or?
I actually did stretch goals pretty much every 1,000. So, because I really was not expecting to get that much support for the game. And so I started with like, okay, I'll do one every 1,000 after our initial goal. And then I ended up having to add a lot. So that's part of why I'm working on the expansion so quickly afterward, is that was one of the stretch goals that we hit, was basically getting that out quickly and getting it to Kickstarter backers. So
fantastic.
It also added a few of extra species were added into the game as part of that.
Very nice,
including the Trichosa, which is one of our cool ones as well.
It says something about people wanting to play custom characters. I mean, when we see, we watch a lot of streams as well where people are playing some kind of TTRPG, usually D&D, some kind of homebrewed version, and all we see is custom designs, custom characters, custom combat. Sometimes they play without combat at all. They just do, just for the role-playing aspect. Sometimes it's very crunch heavy or whatnot, but all of it denotes that people want something to play where they can make it their own. And obviously they see that in your work.
And seeing people actually start playing the game has really been my favorite part of the whole process. Is just getting to see people actually enjoying it now. So very rewarding.
Awesome. Yeah, I can imagine that. So, speaking of customization, welcome to the question of the week, sir. If you could bring one ability of your creation into your real world life, what ability would you want to bring?
That's a tough decision.
Isn't it, though?
Abilities or abilities and spells?
Oh, spells, too. Yeah,
I would always say
just one of them. You don't get everything that leads up to the one you pick, though, right? You get to pick one spell.
Matt already knows what mine's going to be.
I think I might go with the transmute self spell, which is one of my favorites. It's basically like the like transmutation magic is very Full Metal Alchemist-esque.
Oh, cool.
And so, or Avatar, they're kind of similar. So it kind of is supposed to fill both. But
I approve of both.
Transmute itself is sort of like you can morph your body around and do kind of anything you want with that. There's some limitations on it in the game, but it's fairly versatile, and you get to kind of transform yourself in whatever way you see fit at the time. So I might go with that. Definitely be up there.
Breathe underwater.
Grow an extra head. Bite somebody's face off with some gnarly fangs.
Wolverine claws, whatever.
Yeah. A little schnicky snarl.
Yeah.
So violent.
So, yeah. Go ahead, Matt. What do you think mine is?
There's so many options, but fireball is what comes to mind.
That's exactly what it is. It's fireball. It's either that or summon Slod.
Sure.
It'd be great, man. He'd be this tall. He'd have a raspberry on his head, just a giant raspberry that he's wearing.
Yeah.
And a mallet. It would be. I love slots. All right, what would yours be? Flame strike?
Cure disease.
Cure disease?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you're going for the good thing.
Imagine
mine
that.
Cures disease too. Fireball cures disease.
It sterilizes.
That's absolutely true.
There's no disease left in what used to be that building.
Yeah. It's urban renewal will be another one.
Yeah.
If we were talking Shadowrun. Yeah. Ian, where can interested people find your work?
We have a website, apotheosisrpg.com, and there's links to the PDF through drive-through and all that. We're working on getting the physicals available online as well. You can also follow us on social media at Apotheosis TRPG, and that'll be for anything, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. So check us out there.
Ian Tassin is the creator of Apotheosis RPG. Check out the site and the Apotheosis game. Ian, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me on. It was great.
Did you enjoy this interview? Write to us. info@goblinscorner.com, or you can reach me, Eric@goblinscorner.com, or
me, Matt @goblinscorner.com.
We're on all the things. Matt, what are some things we're on?
Well, we're on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch.
As Goblins Corner.
And Instagram.
As The Goblins Corner. Did you like our show? Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player, YouTube, and Twitch.
If you could, do us a favor, click the 5 stars, give us a review on iTunes, Podchaser, and YouTube. Boost our show, and it feeds the hungry algorithm.
Or we'll cure your disease through Fireball, Flame Strike, or I guess Matt's spell. That's all the time we have for tonight. Once again, my name is Eric.
And I'm Matt.
We'll see you next time.
Good night, folks.
The Goblins Corner has been written and produced by Eric Holden
and Matt Staples.
D20 did our music.
And this is, in fact, a subterranean production.
Your voice is so low.